And for one of them, it actually came out kind of high, and I asked, why is it so high? And what they said was, yeah, it's because you're shipping things by plane from Bangladesh. And I'm like, but actually what we do, and we take a lot of pride in doing this, is we actually find flights that are already leaving anyway from Bangladesh to the destination, and they have these small spaces, so we actually fit our products to those spaces. So why is this counted as like new flights flying from Bangladesh all the way to New York? That makes no sense. And plus, to your point about workers, we work with Bangladesh because we actually work with climate refugees there, and through our work, we pay them about 4 times the local wage to help them rebuild their homes after their homes are destroyed by climate change. So there's a lot of meaning to being able to produce products there and work there. That is absolutely not even counted in that results that we received. So it's such a thorny problem, and I think we're still figuring out what is the best way to measure. But I think right now, actually for us, we decided that one of our North Star measurement is how many products are we switching to zero waste products. Because despite all the confusion, one of the things that we know for sure is that if you can have a zero fabric waste product that uses local leftover existing materials and does not produce more fabric waste for the future because the design itself doesn't have any scraps left that you're going to have to burn and leave, and you end up saving like up to 50% on fabric use, we know that's definitely better than normal design. And also we don't want to create any more new products because in fashion we really don't need more new things. So we partner with brands and we switch their products to zero waste products, and that is one of our metrics that we have confidence in, that we really track closely. I totally hear you because it's such a complicated problem, and for us, we really try to understand what are the things that we are more confident in, and really try to use a few North Stars to guide our decisions.
That's great, thanks for sharing.
So that's really admirable, that's amazing what you're doing. From measuring impact in general is extremely difficult, right? Because across the world there's no agreed upon standards and agreed upon regulation that actually an independent entity goes and says to companies, okay, this is your emissions and this is your emissions, or this is your impact on the local community that you're working with, or your negative impact where you're actually benefiting them. I think that's a huge problem in today's world, is that there is no agreement and no standardization of any of this. From our perspective, from 4401, we are removing carbon emissions. That's our North Star. So we want to be a tool and an enabler to companies to help remove their emissions from existence. The problem is that we form, I would say, well, there's one main measurement in our sector, which is the duration of carbon removal. That really matters a lot. So how permanent is that CO2 actually removed? When you look at one side of the spectrum, it's basically planting forests and planting trees. If you plant one tree, it absorbs X amount of carbon over its lifetime and is stored in its bark. That's counted as X amount of tons of carbon removal that can be then allocated to a company that buys that carbon credit. On the other end of the value chain of permanence is mineralization, where we actually take the CO2, react it with a rock in the subsurface, and turn it into another rock. And that CO2 is permanently immobilized in rock form from existence. It's removed from the carbon cycle. The difference here is that for us, with our process, that CO2 is gone forever. It's not humanly possible to convert it back to its gaseous form unless it's literally mined up, put into a cement kiln, and heated up to 800 degrees Celsius. It's not going to happen naturally. But a tree can burn down, and we've been seeing it everywhere. I was flying into Seattle Airport a few months ago in October and just seeing forests of tech company carbon credits just burning down. So, this is not durable. So how do you start measuring, how can you allocate a certain amount of supply of forestry credits versus high durable mineralization credits to a company and ask them to measure it in the same way for 1 ton of carbon dioxide? So without that standardization across, agreement across the world, it's really hard for companies to jump into the green economy because they don't know how to. So we need that kind of independent body to come in and say, all right, these are the rules, so that all of this trillions of dollars of capital that's ready to be mobilized into the green economy can actually take part.
We need some kind of standard, but at the same time, all of you give example on how hard it is to come up with a standard. How do you know what is your benchmark, your business as usual? There's opportunity costs, the ones that you reduce, that you can't be counting, like you were saying, the airplanes space. They were already flying. How do you calculate the incremental? So these are definitely challenging questions. Following up on, for example, for the larger corporations, because you're setting a target, do you get questions, like outsiders questioning your targets? What do you do to convince them?
Yeah. So financial sector require us to reduce emission, our value chain emissions from scope 1, 2, and 3. And financial community created a coalition called GFANZ, and which was created in Glasgow, COP26, last 2 years ago. It's a financial, so they want to reduce emission from their portfolio, investment portfolio, to become net zero. So Panasonic just decided to invest $4 billion to create a new factory in state of Kansas, and it's significantly reduces societal emission, but at the same time, as I said before, emit a little bit to produce more battery. So financial industry does not like that. So they cannot. So if following their guidelines strictly, they cannot invest to such a clean transition. So thanks to the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, they're giving the billion of money to produce more battery. But before that, the financial industry is still struggling. So some creative, smart, big bank and the investment firms and dropouts from the coalition. That's smart, but. So it's a narrow scope of the measurement, and so we need. So it's not only financial market to the regulator, the corporates. It's too much focus on reduction. So too much focus on how we reduce the negative emission, the neglecting the ability of creating the positive impact. I completely agree it's difficult to measure. But we are working on WBCSD, who is a contributor to define today's GHG protocol with WII. And we have Japan will be is a presidency of G7 this year. And we're gonna propose the new perspective on how we measure the ability to calculate, to generate, to impact society, called avoided emission, and through our product, through the company's product and service. So we need the different view. Otherwise, we will make a mistake to discriminate.
Like you're saying, the kind of you also bring a country perspective, how Asia or Japan is helping out. You also raise up a great tension that sometimes the financial return may not be there. There may be banks who have a requirement of financial return, and you're showing societal impact. How do you balance these two? So perhaps Louis, you would be the right person to ask. How should we think about, you have a startup that maybe can say we make huge amount of emissions reduction or storage, but then I'm not so sure about financial return. How would you look at these two?
Well, let me double click on many of the comments that were raised with respect to how impossible it is to standardize measurement. Because even for long-term duration storage, we're relying on simulative results, and let alone we're still arguing whether or not our climate models are accurate. There are even papers doing comparison studies on what is exactly the right way to model climate. And I think we just have to be very sober and aware of the fact that like this is a continuous effort that we need to put into looking at from multiple different angles. Like our fund supports System Dynamics group at MIT to like different efforts basically going into how do we get better at this iterative process, because I'm a physicist by training, so I'm always drawn to being the most reductionist out of everyone, but also at the same time, I know the risk of being path dependent on a number that, I'm a huge believer that bad measurement is even worse than having no measurement. Like, for example, I think I have utmost respect for many investors out there, but KKR's impact fund's measurement of human value of life and thus turning that into impact capital is really missing the point, because they literally do like, this is the number of people that we impact, and because the Department of Transportation value each human being's insurance value is $2 million per person's head. Thus, we can quantify in dollar figures, this is how much impact we're making. I mean, that sounds really good for LPs and some of the people that want to be able to measure for the sake of measuring, but it really misses a point on the grand scheme of things of where we should be heading towards. Because even for, like, say, big corporations or like smaller startups, like when they're impacting different ways to reduce or store carbon, it's not only about one company, you're probably going to have 100,000 subsidiaries, partners, and you cannot enforce them to be changing their behavior either. And you don't have complete visibility into their accounting books either. So like, we just have to be really mindful of how like this is prone to error and greenwashing. I think people are prioritizing things a little too fast because it helps with raising money for the survivability of companies, and then until you have cash flow positive, you obviously have to get money from somewhere to be able to do it, and ultimately you might be able to do amazing things. But throughout the process, we should never really overemphasize certain numbers over the others. So coming back to your question, I think I'm a firm believer that it's a really harsh thing, but that even if you're a nonprofit, any company, any organization should be ultimately reaching or working towards financial sustainability. So that's, I would say if you're intentional about compromising profit over commitment to greenhouse gas reduction, and you have to get really creative as to how you're going to be able to supply cash flow from that perspective to be able to reach sustainability on the financial side or organization side. I think getting confused between the two is really just delaying the ticking time bomb. And I think that as a larger society, there are many funds. I mean, I co-invest with some of the blended capital funds that incorporate both nonprofit endowment monies as well as traditional LP money. And I think blended capital is risky because sometimes they're looking for non-concessional returns while at the same time looking for market returns. To me, it's just a confused capital, and that only is hurting the industry more than anything else. Because this is our 5th or 6th cycle of having climate tech boom. Obviously, the largest one in history because of crazy inflation, cheap money that got into the industry during COVID. But in order to sustain this, we gotta be ever more clear about what it means to build a business in this sector.
Anyone want to follow up on Lewis's thoughts?
I do, because what you're saying really resonates with me, and I would actually say that for me as a startup, I see that unless you can actually align business growth with, or like good business return with also having a good impact on the environment, it's really hard to scale and survive. And I see that because not only is it from the investor side it's hard, but also in terms of getting customers on board, that's really hard. For example, I can speak to the sustainable fashion space. In Europe, there are several really great companies where they have these awesome innovations on textiles, but the end product is really expensive. So what happens is you get all these fashion brands that want to partner with them and they do small pilots so that they can market the hell out of it and talk about how great it is that they use this material. But then they never want to actually scale this product and actually use it across their products in a way that makes an actual bit difference in this industry. So I think unless you can find a way to actually have a good business model that makes sense and a product that is good for the environment, it is so hard to actually make a real difference, and it goes back to greenwashing. So I really see what you're saying, not just on the investor side, but also just from the growth of the startup side.
Yeah, just to add to that, it's really hard to build a sustainability-focused startup because at the moment there's no regulation or even market pull that requires companies to buy sustainable products and to replace regular ones. So unless that product is cheaper, it's never going to be mass adopted. And that's the problem that we have now. Sustainable fashion is one of them. Carbon removal particularly is extremely hard because there is not even a market yet. And that's where we're struggling with the most. There's no regulation that forces companies to reduce their carbon. There are targets, net zero 2030, 40, 50, whatever, but these are not, countries and companies are not held accountable towards those yet. And until that happens, that market doesn't exist. It's all voluntary at the moment. Tech companies or even industries are coming out and buying credits, buying sustainable products, potentially for marketing, for potential greenwashing. We're not going to say no to it, of course, please get the market started, but until that comes in and that structure comes in that forces effectively companies to decarbonize, it's really hard to build a company when investors come and say, wait, you have no technology demonstration and no market to sell your products into? Okay, we don't want to touch it. So it's like it's a huge appetite for risk that investors need to come in with to invest in sustainable or climate-focused startups. Thank you, Louis. And to look at this entire industry because it takes a really, really specific sort of impact-focused investor with a large risk appetite to come in and help us get started until a larger structure comes into place. But I agree with you very much. It's a ticking time bomb. There's no point waiting for a lot of these companies. Eventually it's going to come, so hopefully everyone's getting prepared.
Thank you for this very rich dynamic discussion about the measures and the challenges, the trade-offs. Let's switch tones, and since we're in an Asia business conference, curious in, especially those of you with experience working in Asia or particular countries in Asia, how do you see the opportunities or challenges there, and also the public's perception? Are they willing to pay a premium for green products? Are they buying into the idea? Are you getting support? Are you facing more of the friction? Or if it's changing over time?
I think consumers are pretty practical. If it benefits them, they will buy it. If it doesn't benefit them, they will not buy it. So we've seen much more traction in China. I work in the China market around food, around beauty products, things where people actually feel as though this directly goes into their system. With fashion, they don't really care. So it's not a, at this moment, I would say that being X level of sustainable though is necessary, but not going to sell you anything. So if you're not, even if the consumer doesn't care, just to be in the market, you almost need to have it like, hygiene checked off to some degree, but no one actually is paying you for it. Sorry to throw cold water in everybody's face.
Any opposing or agreeing views?
I'm paying 5,000 extra the airline ticket to buy carbon offset. So I'm quite often back and forth to Japan and US. The one flight emits 10-ton emission. So to offset my personal 10-ton responsibility, it costs $300. So to offset $300, I'm spending the money it's a no regulation, it's my personal extra. I'm investing in the Indonesia nature project. I want to make it the credit, but just spending. So I want to make it the Web3 carbon token or something. It's not just spending money, it's more asset based or something like that. But yeah, consumer is strong, but we can't wait. So in Asia, it's not only the nature-based project, but also, so I'm working on the Indonesia as a last year's the G20 presidency, and this year the India is the G20 host. We are working on that, and it's not following the developed countries, but also the leading the green economy and the transition were built from scratch. And so it's a huge opportunity out there.
Can I just add to what I said though? I think it's a high-class problem. Like, is there a category of consumers who care and who care about green messaging, etc.? I mean, you know, I did a little bit of studying here, and I remember there was a class, and it was a marketing class, and the professor said something along the lines, there are some people who will pay $20 for shampoo, and there are others for whom, like, $2 shampoo is fine, it doesn't matter, right? And there are other people who pay $100 for shampoo. And marketing, messaging, a lot of the green, the leveraging of green, those are the $50 people right now. And even then, it's not all of them who care. And that's why, you know, at the lowest level, which is the biggest level, it's not even part of the hygiene check. Right? So the hygiene check is already in the middle class markets where it's a hygiene check, but it's not creating actual demand. At the higher level, you can probably get something out of it, but it's again, it's a high-class problem.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add, just from a 10,000-foot view here, from the perspective of Asia, and it's an extremely difficult challenge for the continent. In terms of carbon emissions in general, you know, the Western world or the developed nations have profited and grown off cheap energy from fossil fuel producing products for decades. And now we're at a point where Asia is growing at significant rates and surpassing these economies in terms of size, but they're being asked to do so in a renewable and sustainable way. And it's almost unfair that we're at this point where, you know, there's a massive growing middle class in these nations, there's a wealth generation, and it's incredible to see, and it's only fair, right, that Asian countries and the whole continent goes through this transition. But then they're being unduly asked to do that with, at the same time, offsetting carbon emissions or doing it in a sustainable way, in whatever form that is, buying expensive sustainable products. And it's unfortunately where we are today. The climate problem is a global problem. We've now come to the realization that it is going to, you know, come closer than we think, right? 1.5 degrees by 2033. And without the contribution of Asian nations, we're never going to get there. I mean, we can talk about the US and Europe and their contributions and their policies as much as we want, but without China, India, large Asian economies, that climate problem is never going to be solved. There's hundreds of millions, billions of tons coming out of there. On the flip side, there is a little bit of optimism because the wealthier nations have driven down the cost of these products over time. You know, they've bought expensive solar panels, and that unit cost of solar panels has just dropped to the point where renewable energy today is cheaper than coal-produced energy. And so there is an opportunity for all developing nations to leapfrog that entire cost curve coming down and mass adopt sustainable products if they get cheap enough on a unit economic basis, so that they're not more expensive, you know, buying $300 worth of carbon credits to offset flights, for example, to the point where they're not more expensive than the alternative. So if we get to that point, I think Asia has an incredible opportunity to grow at the rates that they want to, that they are, at the same time doing it sustainably. Because, but on the other side, if we don't get down that low, there's no way that these nations are going to say, okay, let's do it in a sustainable way, but not grow as fast. like degrowth. It's just degrowth and sustainability don't happen at the same time. They have to happen together. So we need to be able to grow at a cheap cost, and that's really, really hard to do at this time, but hopefully we're getting there.
I think you highlighted a great opportunity, which is if you think about Asia, they're growing right now. You don't have to go through the mistakes or the same path that the other countries grew in, right? So maybe their path involves more dirtier energy, but you can jump straight to renewable energy, and that's maybe why they can start investing so much in solar, the alternative renewable energies. I also want to end on a happier note, which is the other hope I see is I see a lot of students coming and asking like, I really care about climate change. I want to pursue something in the career of climate change. And hopefully more of them will go into these sectors. They can bring down the cost of the technology. They can bring in more people to solve the management problems. And the students, when they come to me, I sometimes don't know how exactly to answer it. And they like to ask, like, I'm interested in climate change. What advice do you have for me? How can I pursue this career? And I would like to draw this mic to you and curious in how you might answer a student like this. Anyone want to start?
I think the answer is don't try to over-optimize your life. I think, you're not, as we see, you're take a risk, get your hands really dirty, and don't say that like just because you went to HBS and you have student loans, you still then also need to be a trillionaire. Okay? Like, I think the best way to have impact is to be willing to get your hands really dirty and have the impact. And if that's in a huge way, then great. But if that's in a small way, then good for you as well. But please, like, my first piece of advice is throw away the idea of the fact that you need to be a millionaire.
I guess my quick take is climate change is an extremely broad space, bringing together so many different disciplines. I am still also developing my career as well as trying to navigate this space, but I wish I spent 99% of my time really thinking about what I'm bringing to the table and how that best aligns with which role you can play within the ecosystem, because people jump into it too fast and then get stuck in this confused cycle way too long. And also don't over-optimize.
I agree. I think you should start now if you're interested. Also, I think it's important to know that this is a dialogue, not a monologue. And what I mean by that is we talk about greenwashing. I think sometimes people do it because deliberately, but a lot of times it also happens because people just don't know. And there's so much uncertainty, so much that we're still learning about what is the right path, that I think it's really important to surround yourself with people who are open to having healthy debates with you and push back on you and challenge how you're thinking about moving forward, and also open up your ideas to get feedback from others constantly who can challenge and make you think about problems in multiple different perspectives, so you can get to a better solution. So that's my advice.
I think for me, when the dot-com bubble was taking off, everyone was saying, oh, I want to be working at an internet company. And now, what is an internet company? It's everything. Everything is an internet company. You can't be involved in a company unless it's an internet company. And I think green or climate or sustainability is going to be exactly the same. Today we talk about being in a climate company. Oh, I want to work in the green economy. By 2050, every company will be a green company. If it's not, we're going nowhere. So I think expanding off Lewis's comment earlier, anywhere you go, wherever you want to go in your career, you can work in that position in a sustainable way, in a green way, in a climate-focused way, because every company will have to transition in that way. So wherever you end up, find the people in your organization that are making those decisions to transform that organization to be more sustainable. And you can have an impact wherever you go. So it doesn't have to be a climate company, this is our mission, climate change. No, it can be any company that has to figure out how to transition in the new world that's coming.
Yeah, I spent 20 years the software industry called SAP in the enterprise software, and then left SAP to join Panasonic as a youngest corporate officer in the 100 years company history, and so thanks to digital. So, maybe you know the Stanford University in creating the new school, and just John Doerr in investing the $1 billion to create a new school at Stanford, the climate school. He said the climate change is the next computer science. So 20 years ago, I studied computer science. I chose the computer industry, but now climate. Probably 10, 20 years, it takes longer, maybe, but climate is the next chapter of your lovely life.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, and thank you everyone for being here. I hope you all take away and have an idea on how we can all help with this green economy. Thank you. Please